Well, good evening, everybody, and it's a great honor to be with everybody here tonight as the new chair of IRI. I want to begin by thanking Dan Twining for his energized leadership, the IRI board, so many of my Senate colleagues who have joined us tonight. You might see Republicans and Democrats here this evening, and of course, many supporters of IRI who have made this a very, very successful night. So how about a round of applause for all of them? Now, one of the honors of my lifetime was having John McCain as a friend and a mentor. Like most things with Senator McCain, it was not a subtle experience. In fact, a lot of the time I felt I had absolutely no choice in the matter. So when he asked me to take over his chair, he, of course, wasn't really asking, but I would have willingly done so even if I had had a choice. So tonight we celebrate freedom and recommit to the mission of IRI, which is more critical than ever. This is so because when we look across the globe, one of the most challenging issues that face our nation and others is the growing authoritarian movement. The rise of authoritarian governments and the political organizations that support them have sown doubt about the strength of democratic institutions and even democracy itself. Let's face it, democracy can be messy. Disagreements, sometimes ferocious disagreement, is the hallmark of representative government. And because of our transparency, it is out there for all the world to see. The good, the bad, the ugly. Yet we all know that such disagreements ultimately lead to a better tomorrow of greater knowledge, compromise, and progress. We know this because it's played out in our history time and time again. But other countries don't always have that history to draw on. They see democracies as sometimes unworkable. They see efficiencies in the authoritarian governments. Autocratic governments are able to act swiftly. They don't have contentious city council meetings and community groups that band together the magic and sometimes the frustration inherent in our democracy. If they need a road, a pipeline, a bridge, or even an army, they just build it. In times of turmoil, a top-down government in charge of all things can be tempting. And America is not immune to this. In the 1930s, many Americans and millions around the world were attracted to the communist authoritarian model on the left and the fascist model of the right. Even today, the socialist temptation is making a comeback in the halls of Congress. But we've also seen how these authoritarian models of government ultimately collapse on themselves and can wreak havoc and destruction, especially for their own people. The last time authoritarian governments were on the march globally, the result was World War II. That war taught us many lessons, but perhaps none as important as the lesson that President Truman underscored in 1945 in a speech after returning from the Potsdam Conference. Here's what he said. The war has shown us that we have tremendous resources to make all the materials for war. It has shown us that we have skillful workers and managers and able generals and a brave people capable of bearing arms. All these things we knew before. The new thing, the thing which we had not known, the thing we have learned now and should never forget is this, that a society of self-governing men is more powerful, more enduring, more creative than any other kind of society, however disciplined, however centralized. We know now that the basic proposition of the worth and dignity of man is not a sentimental aspiration or a vain hope or a piece of rhetoric. It is the strongest, most creative force present in the world. President Truman was right, of course. Indeed, the creative power of America's democracy has done more to liberate men and women across the globe from tyranny and oppression, literally hundreds of millions of people, than any other force in human history. American democracy has many other attributes. It has a history of producing principled citizens dedicated to liberty, some of whom we will celebrate tonight, like John McCain, a naval aviator with a swagger and love of liberty, a man who fell in love with his country when he was a prisoner in someone else's, and his wife Cindy, who has done so much to address the scourge of human trafficking, and Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, a stalwart believer in freedom who argued for dismantling the South African apartheid regime in his maiden speech on the floor of the U.S. Senate. But it isn't just the famous men and women of our country that our democracy produces every day. I've had the honor of serving in the U.S. Marines for 26 years. I continue to marvel at the exceptional men and women from all across the country, different races, different creeds, who volunteer to support and defend the Constitution, knowing full well that doing so could mean sacrificing their own life for our liberty. When you serve in the military from day one, you begin to understand true equality, immortalized in the words of Thomas Jefferson, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Or, as one of my Marine Corps drill instructors put it less eloquently and more forcefully on our first day of boot camp, in my eyes, you are all equally worthless. My orders are to weed out all non-hackers who cannot serve in my beloved Corps. Do you maggots understand this? American democracy also produces many political miracles every single day. Let me transport you thousands of miles away to my home state, my hometown, to an auditorium in Anchorage, Alaska. A few weeks ago, a record 260 men and women from 56 different countries raised their right hand and pledged allegiance to the United States of America in a naturalization ceremony. This is a video. This is a very short video I want you to see that I took from the stage of that event. Let's see if it works.
That I will support and defend. The Constitution. And the laws of the United States of America. Against all enemies. Foreign and domestic. That I will bear. True faith and allegiance. To the same. That I will bear arms. On behalf of the United States.
Now, I go to these naturalization ceremonies back home very regularly, and if you want to stir in your soul a sense of patriotism and witness the miracle of American democracy, I would encourage all of you to do so as well. Finally, when needed, American democracy can produce long-term strategies with the consent of the people that help ensure its own survival. Little did President Truman know that after World War II, he was going to be facing another incredible, difficult challenge with the Soviet Union and the Cold War. Our country was tired after the brutal war of World War II. It appeared that we weren't up for the challenge, but of course we were. President Truman's ambassador to the Soviet Union, George Kennan, laid out our strategy in his now famous article, The Sources of Soviet Conduct, where he encouraged America to, quote, enact a policy of firm containment that would increase enormously the strains under which the Soviet empire must operate, and in this way promoting tendencies which must eventually find their outlet either in the breakup of the Soviet Union itself or the gradual mellowing of Soviet power. In 1982, President Reagan helped reinvigorate this strategy of containment by launching the National Endowment of Democracy and IRI in his famous speech before the British Parliament. And just 7 years later, the Berlin Wall came down, and just as Kennedy predicted, the Soviet Union broke up peacefully, a remarkable triumph of American democracy and strategy. So let me conclude by noting that I believe we are now at a point in history analogous to the late 1940s, as the United States awakens to the challenges posed by the dramatic economic and military rise of communist China. China has demonstrated the ability to control its population while significantly growing its economy, something the Soviet Union was incapable of. China's leaders aggressively tout their desire to export their authoritarian political model to countries around the world. But here's the good news. America's political leaders, Republicans and Democrats in the Congress, have awoken to this challenge and recognize that the American ideal and the promotion of democracy will be a critical component of our policies to address this. And the Trump administration's national security strategy also recognizes this. As Vice President Mike Pence said recently in talking about the China challenge at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit, quote, nations in Asia that empower their citizens, nurture civil society, fight corruption, and guard their sovereignty are stronger homes for their people and better partners for the United States. In essence, the Vice President was describing the work of IRI, the important work we are here to celebrate tonight. I'm very confident that as we have done in the past, Americans will come together to safeguard our democracy in the coming decades, regardless of the threat or challenge, and defend the democracies of those of our allies. Your support of IRI, which we greatly appreciate, will be critical in that regard. So I want to thank you again, and now I want to welcome to the stage my good friend and a great defender of liberty, Senator Lindsey Graham. Thank you very much.